Okay, I think we're about ready to start. Welcome back. We continue with session 2B now, and it's my pleasure to present Poul Toft Frederiksen, who earned a PhD from the Technical University of Denmark in 1989. And today he's principal scientist at Grundfos, and he's here to talk about what it takes for PhDs to succeed in an industrial environment, and which part of the PhD training that are essential and which perhaps need to be discarded. So please welcome Poul to the stage.
Let's see if I can get this to work. I can say just like Gilderoy Lockhart in Harry Potter, can everybody see me? Can everybody hear me? Excellent. Fish out of water. PhDs outside academia, what does it take to succeed? That's quite an ambitious headline, I'd say. And I'm a bit humbled by, that was perhaps not so bright putting that up. It promises a lot. What are my qualifications to talk about this? Well, as you heard, I have a PhD from 1989. That's a long time ago.
And a lot changed.
And a lot of changes. Actually, I had my foreign exchange experience in a place where you can never go. West Berlin. It doesn't exist anymore. So, since then, I have been working with universities, with PhD students, with master students, with research projects, more or less continuously. So, what I'm going to tell you here is not the official Grundfos policy. It's simply my reflections, my very personal reflections. So take it for what it's worth. I work at Grundfos, as I said. Mind you, if you ever try to get a job here, note there is a D here and there is only one S here. It's very important. We sold the other S to Danfoss back in the 60s. No, but it might get you discarded when you send your application. So take care. We make pumps. Pumps are incredibly uninteresting. Nobody in their right mind would ever want a pump, even the word, right? I mean, everybody loves to get a box of Lego bricks, right? Woohoo! But a pump, who wants a pump? Nobody. On the other hand, if the pump doesn't work, other things may start to fail. Pumps solve absolutely essential problems. And I have a point here I'd like to get back to in a moment. By the way, I'm an engineer. How many of you have an engineering background? Okay, how many of you do not have an engineering? So you're just raising your left and right hands, or am I just totally unable to count? So how many humanities? A few, great. Social science? You're still there. But it appears a majority from engineering. Okay, I hope you will all be able to use what I want to tell you. Now, I have moles under the lawn in my garden that are more visually oriented than I am. So some of my slides are stolen from our corporate presentation, and some, you may guess which, as we go along, I made myself. The next one is definitely made by our absolutely brilliant communications department. Look, it moves and stuff. As I said, pumps deal with solving problems. And mind you, we are getting ever more problems. Let's try and check. Every tap means that the population of this earth has increased by 1. Net 1. Can you imagine? We have climate change. And climate change, if you think about it, it's all about the water. It's all about the water that suddenly isn't where it should be or is where it shouldn't be. The temperature rises, what happens? The water melts. Climate change is all about the water. So the problems that pumps solve grow day by day. We have flood, we have drought. We have no less than 650,000, 660,000 million people without even the privilege of drinking decent water. We have 1 in 3 persons on this planet without proper sanitation. That is an absolute disgrace. So, pumps solve problems. You are, as PhDs, as finished PhDs, your field is absolutely as uninteresting as pumps. What matters are the problems you can solve. And this slide I made myself. So, but the point is really essential. When you go to a company or another employer outside academia, it is of little relevance what your field is. The question is, what problems do you solve? In that respect, you are a lot like pumps, actually. So, focus on the problems you can solve by going through this prolonged ritual of pain, which a PhD study is. You have proved, of course, that you're very intelligent, at least fairly intelligent, and you have stamina, and you can solve problems independently. When your application comes and it says you have a PhD, that's already there. Now, what matters next is, can you solve the problems that your potential employer has? Now comes one of the cool ones again. Grundfos as a company leans against the UN Development Goal number 6, which deals with providing clean water and sanitation. Now, we're not an NGO, mind you. We do not do good. We're not do-gooders for other people's money. And 95% of what we do are not related to this, but the extra thing that we do deals with clean water and sanitation. We are owned by a foundation which last year managed to create clean water supply for 400,000 people in East Africa, refugees there. That's 0.1% of the problem, but it's still a significant part of the problem. Which means that as an employee of Grundfos, and I should know what I'm talking about because I've been there since Clinton was elected president. It's 24 years, for your information. So there's a purpose to what we do. And we do things, when we do things to make money. Yes, of course. And we do a lot where we just move the water around. But we also always try to give it a twist to a certain purpose. The first one, demand-driven distribution. Do you know that around 1/3 of all water pumped through the distribution system is simply lost? It leaks away. Water, sustainable water in developing countries, that was nothing about technology. Horrible to say for a guy like me. But it was all about the business model, actually. And then the baby that I showed you on the first picture, our small alpha pump, which saves up to 20% of it of the energy bill in private homes. That's not interesting. The really interesting part for me is that it removes from the EU CO2 budget, when we're fully phased in, around 40 million tons of CO2, which compares to 50% of the Danish emissions, cow farts included. So, we have a purpose of being here. We cannot always be working on our purpose. We also have to make money. But, what's this? I'm getting ahead of myself. I was bragging a little bit more about the problems we solve. I mean, 500 million people getting clean groundwater, blah, 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 blah. 400 million people getting heating, that's not as relevant in the future as it is today. And there is one thing, though, I'd say. We don't do clean water all the time, but we always have the focus on energy efficiency. Ever since I started, I've been working on projects more or less related to energy efficiency. And mind you, pumps consume 10% of all electricity generated. We know how to cut it by 40%, which means we could remove 4%, and by being market first movers, we drag the rest of them along, so we can make a significant difference. And that is what I thought I was saying now, is there must be a purpose to what you do. And this has nothing to do with you being PhDs. This has to do with you being a young person entering the work market, right? Find something that gives you a sense of purpose. Now, purpose can be water to the world. We can get on, really with the and speaking loudly. Pardon? Did I have a question? Or was it? I may have had a reflection. It could also be drones. Could be your passion or your purpose. It could be money. Although, I'd say if you started a PhD, money is probably not the driving factor in your life. But do try to make your purpose clear and find somewhere to work where you can live out that purpose. More or less, perhaps it's only a couple of hours a week. I mean, the work has to get done. It's not all glamour. But make sure that your purpose in life aligns with the company you work for. Now, actually I'm talking a lot about pumps, aren't I? Just a couple of words of what kinds of PhDs, because pumps, that's something that just pushes water around, okay? It's actually pretty complex. We use fluid mechanics, motor technologies. I didn't do this slide either. Structural mechanics, hardware technology, by which we mean electronics, power and low power electronics. Sensors and control. Control is incredibly important. Did you know that this pump that has been exploded here, it's a good idea it's exploded, because when you collapse it, it looks like some kind of canned pork. But anyway, it's a pump for multiple family dwellings. It contains 7 microprocessors. Pumps are actually complicated business, and so will your work life be. We do even more. Materials, yes, of course, water treatment. One difference between private sector and academia is we have our yearly, organizational changes and new bosses with new ideas and new strategies and new PowerPoints. So until late last year, I worked in what was it called? Research and technology. Research and technology. Now it's technology and innovation. Anyway, the people stay the same. There are 119 employees here. 26% of these are PhD. We have 31 PhDs, which is, well, it's not Bell Labs, but it's still pretty good. They are dominant in water and in materials research and sensors, but they also act as technical, specialists. You could almost say beacons in other fields. They are the go-to people because they have a very deep technical knowledge. Some, mind you, are actually going into management. And what really is a very strange experience for a person like me, I never thought it would happen, that I share employer with a sociologist. But it does tell something about how the world has changed since I started. When we started in the early 90s, when we got a new idea for a new technology, we just put it in the pump and it almost sold itself. Today, we can do anything, we can't do everything. So we need quite another kind of people than nerds like me to tell us, to find out what is really needed. So I'm glad there are other people than engineers here. We need you. But a sociologist. Well, you should know we almost never look explicitly for a PhD. Most of the jobs we advertise look for a master's or a PhD in some field. You have an advantage, you've proven yourself, as I mentioned previously. So, it's not, I mean, I saw Aalborg University created, how many was it? 267 PhDs last year. I mean, there are lots of you. So just being a PhD does not, make the red carpet roll out, but it's okay. Some words about what you're going to meet. Some of the recent successful people. I tried to make a little gallery. And what's interesting here is Magdalena is from Poland. Dominic, crazy guy, Monty Python specialist, Poland. Victor, he's from Peru, from a village so small we couldn't find it on Google Maps. Wilbert up there, mind him, he made, just like I did, a decidedly below average PhD, but he did get through. Then he worked for 2 years as a specialist in a large company, then out and be CTO, later CEO of a startup company. So his salary is twice the salary of the rest. Not combined, but you get the point. That is, if you want to get into management, that's a great way of doing it. Sorry, girls, he's taken. Lorene's from the Philippines. Anna, Portugal. Xing, China. Boshena from Poland. Her first Danish word, she told me, was Østkriminel. Welcome to Denmark. And Ropro from Thailand. What this shows you is that your colleagues, as they are at the university, at large companies, your colleagues and your competition are international. That's very important. There's a little space up there. So what did they do right? They have, all of them, international experience. 2 of them we actually picked up in Saudi Arabia. Many from Holland, other places, Europe, US. How many of you have not been at least 6 months away from the country of your masters? So pretty few of you dare to admit you have not been half a year away. Okay, because you're brave, because of course you know my message is get out of here. Being abroad for a PhD is absolutely essential in my view, because you learn a cultural flexibility, which, as I recall, is the next one. Funny thing is that this academic culture, which is at universities and also at large companies in the academic departments, is extremely international. But you also have to work with the people in the workshop. That's why I say social flexibility. You have to communicate to them, you have to communicate to management, and you have to communicate to your peers. That can be a tremendous challenge, and that's why I put it up here explicitly. That's one of the things these wonderful young people succeed in doing. They also, of course, have strong technical competences or competences within whatever field we're working in. And as a PhD, you have a structured approach to problem solving. You can do it independently. That's what you'll be trained to do. But these are also fabulous team players. And there's a difference there sometimes. They have the ability to take on new fields. Now, honestly, if you have a PhD, what you learn, then you've been able to dig very deeply into some very narrow specialty. Now, what's really interesting for an employer is not your deep knowledge in that specific field. What is really interesting is your ability to go there. There's a huge difference here, okay? And it's your ability to dig deep that's interesting. Rarely your field. Actually, when I applied for my first job outside academia, I have a PhD in coherent optical communications, which died within 1 year of my thesis, and then just has been resurrected a couple of years ago. Totally dead field. I applied for a job. I came back to we were married, my wife, and said, they want me to do power electronics. I know nothing about power electronics. Oh, heck. You divide the frequency by a factor 1 billion and you increase the power level by a factor 1 billion. It's probably the same. So that's where I learned that my most important ability is actually the ability to go into new fields quickly in a structured way. And then I think we should also, any of you dare to admit you do not know what this means? Okay. Economics 101, capital expenditure, operational expenditure. This is what you pay up front, this is what you pay for having it. Think of a mobile phone or whatever. That's the upfront payment, and that's whatever they bleed from you every single month. Now, whatever you can do in your technical field, however beautiful your solution is, if it's not somehow cheaper or significantly better and not more expensive than the current solution, it's going to die. And that's one huge difference between the private sector and the university. At the university, you have the luxury of exploring. That's actually not a luxury. It's a necessity also for us later to explore what seems to be totally unviable economically. But you have to be ready to kill your darlings always and again in the private sector. And it's always the economy, stupid. Sorry, that was a Clinton quote. Bill Clinton. So, what you should unlearn, in my view, the fear of failure, the desire for perfection. That ties into, I think I'll get back to that a little later at my last point. There's this focus on field rather than challenge. I mean, I have sat through more sessions than I care to think about, listening to PhD students discussing a plot of whatever they measured, and it took them weeks and weeks, perhaps even months, to get where they wanted. And I sit there and I really try to be nice, but I'm filled up to here with, so what? As I said before, it's really the problems you solve that's relevant. That's what you should communicate. Focus on your challenges, not the field. There is a certain tendency to go alone. There's nothing like being first author, right, as a PhD student. It doesn't really work. I mean, very, very few things are made alone in the private sector. And I already talked about the ignoring of economics for some kind of techno-fetishism. You have a tremendous luxury right now. You can focus 3 years on, perhaps even more, if you're lucky, on a single field. I cannot count. Yeah, I can count, but it would take me a long time to count all the different bosses, all the different strategies, all the different organizations, all the different directions I've been through. Things change, and they change much faster, and you have to change with them. There really is, I mean, it's a problem for us to hire, to enter into PhD student projects. Because in many fields, we don't know what's happening in 9, 12 months, and then we can have started a PhD. Honestly, I've done it a couple of times, started a PhD, which halfway through was entirely irrelevant for the company. And that's not fair for the PhD student. So I don't do that anymore. But it is a challenge that our focus changes so much more quickly than university. And then the most important thing, academic communication. You are trained in doing academic communication, which is extremely important because academia, science is built on skepticism, right? There is so much, it sounds strange, but there's so much more trust in the private sector. We believe you until you've proven yourself an idiot, so to say. When you write a paper, you pore over every paragraph. You start by defining, you write the introduction, defining the problem field, and you describe which instruments you used and how you did, and blah, 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 and then blah, 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 page 18 or whatever, if you're lucky in some hefty IEEE journal, you get to the conclusion. You have totally lost your audience anywhere but in academia, if you do that. And that is perhaps, if you only remember one single thing from what I'm saying here today, I think it should be your communication. There's a famous example here. Two, what you could call heroes, right? Churchill and Niels Bohr. He tried to pay for him inventing a nasty thingy, right? The atomic bomb. Niels Bohr thought, we got to do something about this. This cannot be handled within the nation-state system. So he tried to convince Winston Churchill, we have to work with the Soviets to do this in a different way. He got half an hour, and he started by laying out all his premises and working himself step by step through to the conclusion. When he got to the conclusion, Churchill was off suppressing a rebellion in some colony. He detested Niels Bohr because he could never get to the point. And that also happens for you if you start communicating as an academic to a manager or to colleagues. Really, I've done it so many times, believe me. Today, you have to communicate in PowerPoint. That means that what they called secondary clauses or whatever, they don't exist anymore. You have to make your point in 8 words and then dot. It's horrible, that's the way it is. I just made a foresight on how does the water market look in 20, 30 years. I said, I'll do it, but allow me to write a report. Okay, he said, you can write a report, but after that, make a summary in a PowerPoint. Nobody's ever going to read that report, but I had immense pleasure in writing it. So, yeah, 2 minutes. Whoops, I thought I hadn't enough. So, okay, summing up, that was very lucky. Learn a wider problem focus. Focus on the problem, not the field. Learn the entirely new time scale. Remember the economics and be short, sharp, and to the point. People will always ask if they don't believe you. Unlearn the academic communication, which, as I said, has tremendous value in academia. And unlearn going solo, find or hold on to a purpose. Then I have exactly 90 seconds just to tease you. This is all about employability. Entrepreneurship, which is so hot. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, Brennan Page from Google never finished their PhD. I think one of these guys is still actually formally at Stanford. So if you want to be rich, don't finish your PhD. It teaches you the exact opposite of what you need to succeed in entrepreneurship. Of course, it's great if you start by being born white, male, American, rich, and so that you can afford going to the absolute top university in the US, and you love software. But anyway, I just want to say entrepreneurship and finishing a PhD, well, it doesn't help. It will help in employability, but that's quite different. So we have exactly 4 seconds for questions.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions?
Ionela Grigoraș from Aalborg University. How come Grundfos is not hiring PhD students? You said you're mostly looking for master students.
Let me be more clear there. PhDs, finished PhDs, do not have a significant advantage over master students for most of our jobs. We have 2 departments where we practically only hire PhDs. But for many others, a master would be just as good. So it's not that you cannot get a job there as a PhD, but it doesn't confer you a specific advantage. That's one thing. The other thing is employing PhD students at academic projects together with the university. We do that, but we're careful because we want to be sure that our attention is undivided through all 3 years. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but I have a second question.
Yeah?
Okay. What can a PhD do to actually get a higher chance to be employed at Grundfos?
Spell the name right. Find out, try to investigate which of your skills could be employed at an advantageously by Grundfos. Focus on your offering to Grundfos. I can do this, and this, and this.
One last question, anyone?
The rest is silence.
Okay. Well then, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Let's give Paul a big hand.